The rain had been falling softly for hours, tapping against the windows like a quiet reminder that the world outside was still turning, even when everything inside felt still. Inside a modest house tucked away in the hills of Los Angeles, Keanu sat alone on a worn leather couch, his coat still on, damp at the shoulders from the walk back from his car. He hadn't bothered to turn on many lights, just a single lamp in the corner casting a warm, golden glow over the room. The kind of light that doesn't chase away shadows but makes peace with them. It was late. Past midnight. Most of the city had gone quiet, but his mind hadn't. Not tonight. Not on this night. He'd just come back from a small cemetery on the edge of town. Every year, without fail, he made the drive, rain or shine, working or not. Today marked another birthday that would never be celebrated. His daughter's. She'd never blow out candles, never pick out a dress for her first dance, never call him Dad with that sleepy morning voice. She'd only lived a few days, but her absence had stretched across decades, shaping the man he'd become in ways no one could see from movie posters or red carpets. He reached for the coffee table and picked up an old photo album, its cover faded, corners bent from years of handling. He didn't need to open it to know what was inside. He could see the images in his mind, Jennifer laughing in the kitchen, sunlight catching in her hair, River leaning against a wall backstage, guitar slung over his shoulder, eyes full of dreams, and that one blurry hospital photo, tiny fingers wrapped around his own, so fragile he'd barely dared to breathe. He opened the album anyway, flipped slowly through the pages. There was no rush. Time felt different here in this quiet room. With the rain whispering secrets to the glass, he traced the edge of a photo with his thumb, Jennifer holding a stuffed bear, smiling like she knew something wonderful was coming. She didn't know. None of them did. People often said grief fades with time, that it gets easier. But that wasn't quite true. Not for him. The sharp edges softened, yes, but the weight never really left. It just changed shape. Sometimes it sat in his chest like a stone. Other times it curled around his thoughts like fog, making everything feel distant, muffled. He'd learned to live with it, to move through his days with kindness, with purpose, with that quiet intensity fans admired. But alone in moments like this, the mask slipped, and the pain, old, familiar, stubborn, rose to the surface again. He thought about the fan who'd stopped him yesterday outside a coffee shop. Just a young guy, maybe early 20s, eyes red-rimmed, voice shaky. "You've been through so much," he'd said, "and you still seem—" "Okay, how?" Keanu had paused, unsure how to answer. He didn't feel okay, not really. But he'd smiled gently and said, "I guess I just keep showing up." It was true in a way. He showed up, for work, for friends, for strangers who needed a moment of kindness. But showing up didn't mean the ache disappeared. It just meant he carried it while walking forward. He closed the album and set it down, stared at the rain-streaked window. The city lights shimmered in the wet glass, blurred and dreamlike. He thought about all the things he'd never get to say. All the questions that had no answers. Why her? Why them? Why so much loss so young? He'd asked those questions 1,000 times in 1,000 different ways. Therapy helped. Meditation helped. Long motorcycle rides through empty desert roads helped. But sometimes, in the deep quiet of night, the questions came back louder than ever. He stood up slowly, joints creaking just a little, a reminder that time moved forward, whether he wanted it to or not. He walked to the kitchen, filled a glass with water, drank it slowly. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the steady rhythm of rain. No TV, no music, just silence. He liked it that way. Silence didn't pretend. It didn't offer false comfort. It just was. Back on the couch, he pulled a thin blanket over his legs. He wasn't planning to sleep, not yet. But his body was tired, weighed down by the day, by memory, by the kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying invisible things for too long. His eyes drifted shut. Not because he willed it, but because they simply couldn't stay open anymore. The photo album rested on his chest, rising and falling with each breath. Outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle. A car passed in the distance, tires hissing on wet pavement. Somewhere, a dog barked once, then fell silent. And in that stillness, as the line between waking and dreaming grew thin, Keanu let go, not of the pain, but of the need to understand it right now. He surrendered to the quiet, to the dark, to the unknown space between tonight and tomorrow. His last thought before sleep took him wasn't a question but a whisper. I'm still here, and maybe for now that was enough. Keanu didn't wake up in his living room. One moment he was sinking into the soft pull of sleep, the photo album warm against his chest. And the next, he was standing barefoot on cool, damp earth, the scent of pine and wet leaves filling his nose. The air felt different here, cleaner, lighter, like after a storm has passed but before the world remembers its noise. He looked around, confused but not afraid. There were no streetlights, no hum of traffic, no distant sirens. Just trees tall and quiet, and ahead of him a river gliding slowly over smooth stones, its surface catching the golden light of late afternoon sun. He blinked. This wasn't a dream like the ones he usually had, jumbled, frantic, full of falling or missed trains. This felt solid, real. He could feel the earth beneath his feet, slightly muddy, cool between his toes. He could hear the water whispering over rocks, the rustle of branches in a soft breeze. Even the light had weight to it, warm on his skin like a hand resting gently on his shoulder. He took a step forward, then another, drawn toward the riverbank without knowing why. His coat was gone. His shoes were gone. He wore only a simple shirt and pants, like something he might have worn as a boy in Toronto, walking home from school through the woods behind his house. It felt right, familiar in a way that made his chest tighten. Then he saw him, walking toward him from downstream, unhurried, barefoot like Keanu, dressed in plain earth-toned robes that looked worn but clean. His hair was dark, his beard short, his hands rough like someone who'd spent a lifetime working with wood or stone. But it was his eyes that stopped Keanu in his tracks. Not because they were bright or glowing, but because they held a kind of knowing that went deeper than words. They saw everything, the grief, the questions, the quiet strength, the exhaustion, and didn't flinch. "Keanu," he said, voice low and calm, like water over smooth rock. Keanu didn't speak. He just stood there, heart pounding, not from fear, but from something closer to recognition. He'd never been religious in the traditional sense, never gone to church every Sunday, never quoted scripture, but he'd always believed in kindness, in mystery, in the idea that something greater moved through the world, even if he couldn't name it. And now standing here, he didn't need a name. He just knew. He nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said, voice rougher than he expected. "It's me, the man." Jesus, though Keanu didn't say the name out loud, smiled. Not a big smile, just a small lift at the corners of his mouth, the kind that says, "I've been waiting for you. You've carried so much for so long," he said, stepping closer. There was no judgment in his voice, only tenderness. More than anyone should have to. Keanu looked down at his hands. They were empty, but they felt heavy anyway. He wanted to say something, "Thank you," or "I'm tired," or "Why me?" But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he just shook his head, eyes stinging. Jesus didn't push. He stood beside him, gazing out at the river. The water moved steadily, calmly, as if it had all the time in the world. After a long silence, he said, "You keep asking why the pain hasn't gone away." Keanu's breath caught. He hadn't spoken the question. Not here, not out loud, but it had been echoing in his mind for years. How did he know? "I don't understand," Keanu finally said, voice barely above a whisper. "I've tried. I've lived, I've loved, I've helped others. I haven't let it ruin me. But it's still there. Every day, like a shadow I can't outrun." Jesus turned to face him fully. "You think pain is something to be fixed," he said gently. "But sometimes it's something to be honored." Keanu frowned. "Honored? How?" "It hurts. It hurts because it came from love," Jesus said. "You loved deeply, your daughter, your friend, the woman who shared your life. And when love is that real, its loss leaves a mark that doesn't fade. Not because you're broken, but because your heart is whole enough to feel it." Keanu swallowed hard. No one had ever said it like that. Everyone else offered comfort in the form of time heals or they're in a better place. But this felt true. Raw but true. "I just wish it didn't ache so much," he admitted, voice cracking. Jesus reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. His touch was warm, steady. "The ache isn't your enemy," he said. "It's proof you loved well, and love never truly leaves. It changes shape, yes, but it stays." Keanu looked at him, searching his face for any hint of performance, of grandeur. But there was none. Just quiet presence, just understanding. "Then why show me this?" Keanu asked. "Why now?" Jesus smiled again, softer this time. "Because you're ready to stop fighting it. You've been holding your pain like a secret. You're ashamed of, even though it's one of the most honest things about you. Keanu thought about all the times he'd smiled for cameras while his insides felt hollow. All the interviews where he deflected questions about loss with a shrug and a life goes on. He'd thought he was being strong, but maybe he'd just been hiding. I don't know how to carry it differently, he said honestly. You don't have to carry it alone, Jesus replied, and you don't have to carry it the same way forever. He gestured toward the riverbank where smooth stones of all sizes lay scattered in the sunlight. Come, pick one up. Keanu walked to the water's edge, knelt, and chose a stone. Gray, cool, about the size of his palm. It fit perfectly in his hand, worn smooth by years of water and time. This, Jesus said, standing beside him, is your pain. Keanu looked at the stone, then back at him. It's just a rock. It's more than that, Jesus said. It's everything you've lost. Everything you miss. Everything you wish had been different. You've been clutching it so tightly you've forgotten you have other hands. Hands that could hold joy, kindness, hope. Keanu stared at the stone. He had been holding on tight, afraid that if he loosened his grip he'd forget them. Forget the sound of her laugh. The way River's eyes lit up when he talked about a new song. The way Jennifer used to hum while making coffee in the morning. What if I let go? He asked, voice trembling. What if I forget? You won't, Jesus said firmly. Love doesn't work that way. Letting go of the pain doesn't mean letting go of them. It means making room for their memory to live in peace, not in prison. Keanu closed his fingers around the stone again, but this time, he didn't squeeze. He just held it. Felt its weight, its smoothness, its truth. The river flowed on steady and sure. Birds called from the trees. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks. And for the first time in a long time, Keanu didn't feel alone with his grief. He felt seen, understood, held. He didn't know how long they stood there. Time didn't matter here. But when Jesus finally spoke again, his voice was quiet, full of promise. This isn't the end of your pain, he said, but it can be the beginning of a new way to live with it. Keanu nodded. He didn't have all the answers. But for now, in this quiet place by the river, with the stone in his hand and peace in his chest, he felt something shift. Small, but real. Like a door opening just a crack, letting in a little light. Keanu stood by the riverbank, the smooth stone still resting in his palm. The sun had dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the water, turning the ripples into liquid gold. He turned the stone over slowly, feeling its cool weight, its quiet permanence. It wasn't heavy, not in the way a brick or a rock from a construction site would be. But it had a presence, like it carried something inside it, something that couldn't be seen but could be felt. Jesus stood beside him, silent now, giving him space. There was no rush. No pressure to say the right thing or figure everything out in this moment. That alone felt like a gift. In the real world, time was always running out. Deadlines, schedules, expectations. But here, time seemed to breathe. After a while, Keanu looked up. So, this stone, he said, voice low, it's not going away? Jesus shook his head gently. No, and it shouldn't. You wouldn't want it to. Keanu frowned. But it hurts. Every time I think about her, about them, it's like reopening a wound. I know, Jesus said. But pain isn't always a sign that something's wrong. Sometimes it's a sign that something mattered. Deeply. He knelt down and picked up another stone, smaller, darker, worn almost to a perfect oval. See this? He held it out. This could be someone else's grief. A mother who lost a child. A friend who lost their anchor. A stranger sitting alone in a hospital room right now holding a hand that's growing cold. Keanu stared at the second stone. He thought of all the people he'd met over the years. The fans who'd written him letters. The crew members who'd shared their stories between takes. The quiet nods exchanged with strangers at memorial services. Everyone carried something. He just hadn't realized his pain could connect him to them, not separate him. You've spent so much time thinking your grief makes you different, Jesus said, as if reading his thoughts. But it's what makes you human, and it's what lets you reach others in ways you don't even see. Keanu remembered the young man outside the coffee shop just yesterday, the one with red eyes and a trembling voice. He hadn't said much, just listened, offered a nod. But maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. I try to be kind, Keanu said, but sometimes I wonder if it's just habit or guilt. Guilt? Jesus asked, raising an eyebrow. Like, I survived, Keanu admitted, the words coming out softer than he expected. They didn't. So I owe it to them to be good, to do better. Jesus was quiet for a moment. Then he placed the second stone gently into Keanu's free hand. You don't owe them goodness, he said. You offer it because love doesn't end when life does. It changes direction. It flows outward. Keanu looked down at the two stones in his hands, one for his daughter, one for all the others. They weren't the same, but they fit together somehow, like pieces of the same river. Then Jesus stood and walked a few steps toward the water's edge. He pointed to a small wooden boat tied to a low branch, simple, unvarnished, the kind a child might make. Come here, he said. Keanu followed, stepping carefully over roots and wet stones. The boat rocked slightly in the current, tethered but ready. Put the stones in, Jesus said. Keanu hesitated. Just let them go. Not let them go, Jesus corrected gently. Let them rest. So Keanu knelt and placed both stones into the boat. They settled with a soft clink, nestling against each other like old friends. The boat dipped slightly but stayed afloat, bobbing gently in the current. Now watch, Jesus said. As Keanu looked, more stones began appearing in the boat, some large, some tiny, some smooth, some rough. They didn't fall from the sky or rise from the water. They just appeared, as if carried by invisible hands. These are the pains of others, Jesus explained. The ones you've touched, the ones you've listened to, the ones you've sat with in silence. Your kindness didn't erase their pain, but it gave them a place to put it, even for a moment. Keanu's throat tightened. He thought of the times he'd sat with a grieving parent on a film set, saying nothing, just being there. Of the times he'd sent quiet gifts to families he'd never met after hearing their stories. Of the way he always made sure the crew felt seen, valued, because he knew what it felt like to be unseen in your sorrow. I didn't know, he whispered. You didn't have to, Jesus said. Love doesn't need a plan. It just needs a willing heart. He placed a hand on Keanu's shoulder again. Your pain remains because it's part of your story. But it doesn't have to be the whole story. You can carry it without letting it crush you. You can honor it without being trapped by it. Keanu watched the boat drift slightly, held by the rope but moving with the water. The stones inside didn't vanish. They didn't dissolve. But they weren't weighing him down anymore. They were just there, part of the journey. What do I do when I wake up? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. Live, Jesus said simply. Keep showing up. Keep listening. Keep loving even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts, because that's when love matters most. Keanu nodded. He didn't feel fixed. He didn't feel healed in some grand, dramatic way. But he felt lighter. Not because the pain was gone, but because he finally understood it wasn't his enemy. It was his teacher, his reminder, his connection to everything that had ever mattered to him. He looked at Jesus, really looked, at the kindness in his eyes, the calm in his stance, the absence of any need to prove or perform. Thank you, Keanu said. Jesus smiled. You've already thanked me. Every time you chose kindness over bitterness. Every time you gave when you had nothing left to give. Every time you sat with someone in their darkness and didn't look away. The light around them began to soften, the edges of the trees blurring slightly, like a photograph fading at the corners. Keanu knew this moment wouldn't last forever, and that was okay. He took one last look at the boat, at the stones resting together in the quiet water. Then he turned back to Jesus. I'll remember this, he said. You already do, Jesus replied. It's in your bones. And as the river whispered its endless song, Keanu felt something settle inside him. Not an end to sorrow, but a beginning of peace. The light around them began to shift, not fading exactly, but softening, like the world was taking a slow, deep breath. Keanu stood by the riverbank, watching the little wooden boat bob gently in the current, the stones inside resting together like old companions who'd finally found peace. He didn't feel the urge to reach for them anymore. He didn't need to hold them tight to prove they mattered. They were safe. They were seen. Jesus turned to him, his expression calm but full of quiet purpose. There's something else you need to understand, he said, voice low but clear like wind through tall grass. You don't have to carry your pain like a burden, but you also don't have to pretend it isn't there. Keanu nodded slowly. That had always been the hardest part. Not the grief itself, but the feeling that he had to hide it. Smile for the cameras. Give short, tidy answers in interviews. Move on like nothing had happened. As if love could be packed away in a box and stored in the attic of memory. But how? Keanu asked. How do I live with it? Without letting it pull me under? Jesus walked a few steps down the bank and pointed to a flat rock near the water's edge. Sit, he said. Keanu sat. The stone was cool beneath him, solid and steady. Jesus sat beside him. Not too close, not too far. Just enough space for honesty to breathe. Most people think healing means forgetting, Jesus began. Or moving on like the past never happened. But real healing isn't about erasing. It's about integrating, letting the broken pieces become part of your whole. He picked up a smooth pebble from the ground and held it out. This stone has cracks, but it's still beautiful. Still useful. Still part of the river. Keanu looked at his own hands, hands that had held a newborn daughter, shaken the hands of grieving strangers, gripped motorcycle handlebars on long, lonely rides through desert highways. These hands knew loss, but they also knew how to give. How to build. How to comfort. I've tried to be strong, Keanu said. For everyone else, and that's noble, Jesus replied. But strength isn't about never breaking. It's about letting yourself be human, and still choosing to care. He paused, then added, You think your pain makes you weak in front of others, but the truth is it's your pain that lets them trust you. When you don't hide it completely, when you let a little of your truth show, they feel less alone. Keanu thought about the times he'd been recognized in quiet places. A bookstore, a bus stop, a hospital waiting room. People didn't always ask for autographs. Sometimes they just said, I lost someone too, or thank you for being kind. And in those moments, he never felt like a movie star. He just felt like a person who understood. Maybe that's why I keep doing what I do, Keanu said softly. Not for fame, but because it helps. To be there for someone else, Jesus smiled. Exactly. Your pain has become a bridge, not a wall. He stood and gestured toward the boat again. You don't need to carry the stones in your hands anymore. Let them ride in the boat. Let them be part of your journey, not your load. Keanu rose to his feet. He walked to the boat and gently touched its side. The wood was rough but warm, like something made with care. He looked inside, his stone, the others all resting together. No one stone was heavier than the others. They just were. What if I forget how to let go again? He asked. What if I start clutching it all over? You will, Jesus said without judgment. And that's okay. Healing isn't a straight line. It's a circle. You'll come back to this river again and again in your heart in your quiet moments. And each time you'll remember, you don't have to hold it all alone. He placed a hand on Keanu's back, not pushing, just offering presence. Your pain remains because love remains, and love is never wasted. Keanu took a deep breath. The air smelled of wet earth and pine, of something ancient and true. He felt a strange mix of sadness and peace. Not the kind of peace that says everything's fine, but the kind that says, you're not alone in this. Then Jesus pointed downstream, where the river curved out of sight, hidden by trees and mist. That's where you're going, he said. Not away from your pain, but with it. Carried, not crushed. Keanu looked at the path ahead. It wasn't bright or easy, but it was real, and for the first time he didn't feel afraid of it. Will I see you again? He asked. Jesus didn't answer right away. Instead, he said, you'll see me in the eyes of the stranger who needs a kind word. In the silence between two people who understand loss. In the choice to give when you have nothing left. I'm not just here, Keanu. I'm everywhere love shows up, even when it hurts. Tears welled in Keanu's eyes, but they didn't fall. They just sat there warm and honest like everything else in this place. He turned to Jesus one last time. I don't know how to thank you. You already have, Jesus said. By living, by loving, by refusing to let the world harden your heart. The light around them began to blur at the edges like a dream remembering it's a dream. The river's song grew softer. The trees swayed gently as if bowing in farewell. Keanu didn't say goodbye.
He just nodded deeply.
Fully. And took one last look at the boat still tethered, still holding the stones with quiet dignity. As the world around him started to dissolve into golden mist, he felt something settle inside his chest, not a fix, not a miracle, but a quiet knowing. He could carry this. Not perfectly, not easily, but faithfully, and that was enough.